All right, so this video is devoted to talking about the problem of AI model training, and I'm thinking of generative AI specifically. So the context of this, I mean, there's different ways to think about what context this belongs to, but I think it really is a privacy issue fundamentally about people's data being used to train models. All right, so to examine this problem, we're going to use our familiar 6-question framework. And let's think about what the problem even is. So as you know, generative AI is capable of generating words and images that are comparable to the ones that humans generate. Okay, but obviously GenAI doesn't come up with those words and images from nowhere. It needs data. And data, you know, the word data makes us think of like alphanumeric rows and columns and stuff, and that's data, of course. But this data is creative works created by human beings. So generative AI, in order to produce new things, in order to produce new words and images, it has to ingest all the words and images that were created by some humans. And specifically, the problem is that those creators sometimes feel very violated if their work was used for training data, and especially if they didn't consent to it. Okay, so this is the problem that we're dealing with here. What's familiar about this problem? Okay, so this kind of thing is a long-standing issue. This is a question about intellectual property. So property, you know, the concept helps us make sense of theft, or it's necessary to make sense of theft, right? So you can have property, you know, physical property and theft of physical property. That's its own thing, right? Theft of intellectual property is sometimes very difficult to detect, right? So think about in terms of evidence. If physical property was stolen, the evidence would be, okay, now you have this physical property in your possession. You know, the diamond is missing, and now it's like you have the diamond, so that means you stole it, right? It's evidence of theft. Well, theft of intellectual property is not like that. Now, there are two ways it's very easy. One is if the new work is nothing like the original work that you thought was stolen. The other way it's easy is if the new work is very, very, very similar to the work that you created initially. In both cases, you can say, well, this is theft or this is not theft. The problem is that the evidence is just how similar or dissimilar the work is. And of course, that is by degree. And probably there's several levels to those degree. And then some human being, maybe he's from outside of the field, has to judge how similar or dissimilar it is, which can be very messy. And this leads to people running up huge legal bills to try to figure out, is this is this similar or not? Have I been the victim of theft of intellectual property or not? All right, what's new about this problem because of the scale? So as you know, generative AI is trained on enormous amounts of data. Okay, so what if we imagine that we say to the creators of GenAI, a particular system, let's say we're talking about ChatGPT and we're talking to OpenAI, and we say, hey, OpenAI, what you need to do from now on is verify that all of the data has been licensed appropriately, right? So what kind of thing is that to ask them? Well, if we're asking for a little tweak in the system, they might be like, okay, we'll make a little tweak here and, we'll throw some money at this problem and now we fixed it, okay. But the question about, like, we need you to verify the data before it's ingested in the system, that could become an existential question. That is to say, they're like, well, we can't have generative AI if we have to do that because it's just too burdensome to go around verifying all the data that we use because we use so much, we ingest so many works. Now, you might be thinking, good, I don't want them to exist. They're stealing my data. Fair enough. That's okay. But my point here is that when something becomes an existential question for an enormously rich company, they are that much more invested in fighting it. Okay, so if you're going to say, hey, if you don't do this, you go out of business, you can't do your work anymore. They're going to say, well, we're going to bring all of our lawyers and fight this as much as can. So that's a messy thing because unfortunately, in the legal system, money is an amazing asset. So if you have a lot of money, you can do a lot in the legal system. If you have no money, it's very hard to do anything in the legal system. Okay, what is new because of the capabilities of digital technology? All right, so here's one thing, which is that, in the pre-Gen AI world, who do you have to worry about copying your work? There's a kind of a limited band of people that you have to worry about. Probably other people kind of in your field, like other artists, right? You might say, hey, this other artist, took too much of my work, but it'd be like other artists or other musicians or something like that. Well, now all you need to copy somebody's work is just to be able to write a good prompt. So it's kind of a nice thing that Gen AI democratizes certain things, right? Because now you don't have to be some expert or something like that or have some crazy talent to make something nice. But the downside of that is there's lots and lots and lots and lots of people who are able to steal your stuff now, right? Anybody who can write the prompt can steal your stuff, not just some other artist. So that's an issue. It's also worth noting that Gen AI is going to be really good at combining different elements from different copyrighted works. The brush strokes here, the colors here, the form here, whatever. Now, in itself, that's not a new problem, right? That's been happening forever. People, read a few books and they kind of look at a few pieces of art, and maybe without even knowing it, they, make something that combines different elements. So that's not a new problem. But I'm just noting that, it's still a problem and maybe a bit worse because Gen AI is so good at it. Which ethical value is relevant here? Well, I think it's clearly autonomy, right? So this is the right to control what I create. I made something, and I get to decide, how it's used. We have all these intellectual property laws to protect that right to my creation. And when those laws aren't respected, you can think of that as a violation of your privacy, right? I wanted this work to be used this way, and you took it and used it in a different way, in a way that I didn't want you to use it. What can we do about this? Well, there's two kinds of solutions. There's two categories of solutions. One is technical solutions, another is legal. I think we need both as much as we can get. As far as the technical solutions, I think they're somewhat limited in value. I think we should use them as much as possible. But I have the feeling that it's going to be the kind of a cat and mouse game. It's going to be like, come up with a technical solution that makes it harder for the Gen AI, but then the creators of Gen AI are going to find another technical solution that obviates your technical solution, and just kind of a continual game. So for example, I've heard of this product called Glaze, and I don't know exactly how it works, but it's supposed to make it really hard for the Gen AI system to ingest I think it's a painting or like a visual artwork, right? But again, they'll find ways to get around that. So technical solutions are limited. Legal solutions, I think, can be robust. The danger is that we have this, if you make this an existential game, the big players, the ones with all the money and the resources in the world, are going to probably win. But you can think of like opt-out laws. So you would say, I created something, I wrote this book, I drew this picture, and I don't want it to be used in Gen AI. I think that's asking too much of the creator to have to say that. That's, there could be multiple, lots of different kinds of systems. I would favor something like an opt-in law. So, you say, hey, I'm doing this work, and it's okay for it to be used. I'm saying it's okay for it to be used, by Gen AI. So, first of all, that would respect the creator's autonomy. But I also think there's a sense where it could make it more common for a creator to feel okay about their work being used this way. So let me give you a personal example. I'm recently worked on a book project with several other authors, and one thing that the publisher told us ahead of time is that this work can be and probably will be ingested by Gen AI. And so, some of the words you wrote are going to be used to generate other words. Now, some people were uncomfortable with it. I don't know actually if they went through with it. There might have been some people who dropped out of the project. But my personal feelings were, okay, so before I create it, I know that this work could be ingested by GenAI. And what I decided was I was okay with that. So one thing was nice because I felt respected because I was told that this is a possibility. But it also just changed that I felt like, okay, so I know this, and now I can think through whether I want to go ahead with the creation. And the answer for me was yes. Okay, so those are some thoughts on the problem of AI model training.